Ron Oliver,
Yes.
King of Hallmark Movies. How do you feel about that title?
Hey, it's good to be the king. It's great. At a point in one's life, you are just trying to tell stories, and that place, that venue, has allowed me to tell stories. And in the case of a lot of the stories we've told, they've been Christmas motifed, if you will. And it's great because that's a framework, but you can still tell a great story in the middle of all that.
You are motifed differently. We're in the Shameful Tiki Room
We are.
in Vancouver. We'll explain why in a moment. We'll talk a lot about Hallmark in just a moment. But let's start by talking about you. From small town Ontario, how does a kid go from there to a life directing movies?
I guess I was a magician, when I was a kid, and that sort of started things going. I wanted to entertain people. I wanted to tell visual stories, really what magic is as well. And that started it, and then eventually somebody saw me do a magic show, and they hired me to host a TV show, and I learned a bit about production from that. And then I started writing stories. I'd always written when I was a kid, and I had written this horror script. And they brought me in, and we talked about it, and they said, we like the script, and we want you to come write for us. And suddenly I was a writer. I was 25.
But let's back up a little bit, especially with that love of horror movies, which began, a shout out to CKVR in Barrie, Ontario, and watching.
Wow, 100%.
Yeah.
Thank you for knowing that. Yes. So Wednesday nights, CKVR TV in Barrie, Ontario, Canada, had horror nights. And the deal was, because I was maybe like 7 or 8 years old, my mom said, if you go to bed at 9 o'clock sharp, I will wake you up at midnight to watch the horror movie, and then you had to go back to bed again, and then you go to school, dreadful school the next day at whatever time. So I got to watch all these great classic Universal horror movies back then. The Black Cat, Lugosi and Karloff, great films. And that stuck in my head, and that became a love of genre, because I loved horror movies. I was a monster kid. I loved those films. I had all the Aurora monster movie things, So that stayed with me, and then my first script was a horror movie, and my first movie produced was a horror movie.
Leave me alone!
What's going on in here?
Yeah, so given this love of horror movies, how do you what is it about Christmas that appeals to you so much? Seems like a completely different world.
I guess it's the enhanced emotions of it and the enhanced scenario. Because Christmas pictures and horror films, they're two sides of the same coin. They're both, your emotions are at a peak, and people are behaving in ways that they wouldn't necessarily behave, other ways. I think that's part of it. For me personally, it wasn't a plan necessarily. It just kind of happened. I was making some horror films. I did a bunch of television stuff. I did Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark, both in the genre. And then I got asked to do a movie for Warner Brothers called Dennis the Menace Christmas. And I did that movie. I did another Christmas picture and another one. And then suddenly people came to me for that genre of film. And at the same time as I've been making all these Christmas movies, I've been doing other films. But the movies that seem to have captured people's imaginations and really have a fan base are these Christmas pictures. So that's sort of how I became that guy.
Merry Christmas. Stephanie.
Chase, hi.
Hi.
How are you?
It is amazing to see how you can get drawn in to these movies. And so can I ask you some questions, like inside stuff about Hallmark movies? First of all, tell me something about in your past shooting a Hallmark movie that might surprise me, like an interesting anecdote.
Well, we mostly shoot them in the summer.
Yeah.
Because I don't like real snow. I like fake snow. I don't like the real snow. Please, I've been asked to do pictures, and I'll turn them down because you're shooting where? In the north of what? In December? No, it's too cold. So yeah, so a lot of them are shot that way. They can be a challenge to make because we do them on a super short schedule. The routine schedule is about 15 days to shoot an entire picture.
Wow.
And that can be a challenge.
Let's talk about the cliched Hallmark plot. A woman from the big city, her car breaks down. The handsome guy who's running the Christmas tree lot, maybe they went out in the past, now they're together. Do they kind of have cookie cutter plots?
There certainly have been, but there's nothing more delightful. Like Saturday Night Live did a parody of them a couple years ago, and I can tell you that across the board, everybody who makes these movies were thrilled. Because what's more fun than having pop culture make fun of you?
Yeah.
Nothing. That's the best compliment ever.
Michelle is a single mother and struggling baker whose Christmas wish goes horribly wrong. Now she's trapped in a snow globe, and the only person who can get her out before Christmas is her black coworker with no backstory.
Marcus, I'm in here.
Now, what in the world?
He said,
In terms of another criticism of Hallmark movies, maybe a bit, well, definitely more serious than too many Christmas tree lots, is the attractive straight white couple kind of over and over and over again. What about the lack of diversity?
There's a lot of the movies pre a certain time, they weren't as diverse as they might have been. Let's just put that there. That's exactly true. Some of it had to do culturally with the fact that these movies are sold in America. And there are parts of America that, until very recently, where it was difficult to sell a project where you had an interracial couple, for example, or a gay couple. As the culture has evolved, so have these films. I just shot a Hallmark picture in Greece with Jonathan Bennett in the lead and Alexander Lincoln as his husband-to-be. And that was the first gay wedding shot on a Hallmark film.
You know, if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like you and I could finally co-star in one of these movies.
I've always wanted you to say that, Ian.
So let's talk about where we are, because we asked for a location. You're visiting Vancouver, working on a project, and you suggested the Shameful Tiki Room. Why?
As I always suggest, the Shameful Tiki Room, Ian. I love tiki bars. And living in Palm Springs, which we have a huge tiki community there, when I go away on a trip, I love to have a little piece of home. And this place is that. But also, this is it's a fantasy. This room is a fantasy. And much like the movies that I get to make, which are also fantasies, this place is comfortable to me because it's an artifice. It's artificial culture. It's they make great drinks, to be fair. Like when I write, this is the environment I write in. I often write these Christmas movies in bars, tiki bars specifically, in tiki shirts specifically. So this feels like home to me. That's what I love about it. So.
I always think about people watching this interview, young people watching the interview in small towns, wherever they are in Canada, and they see this guy. Maybe you are living out their creative kind of goal of movie making. What do you say to them?
I was lucky, to be sure, but more to the point, I never gave up. And if you have a dream to do something, you're always going to find a way. You will find a way if you do not give up. The people who fail in their lives are the people who give up.
And you talked about your mom waking you up to watch those movies. I assume she played a big part in this nurturing this love of movies.
Absolutely. My mom, my mom was great. She loved old films. She loved films. She loved Hollywood. She loved the glamour of all that stuff. And so you can imagine that growing up in a little tiny village in the middle of nowhere, there wasn't a lot of opportunity for glamour. But my mom strove for that. She pushed and always made sure that you felt like you were never more than a plane trip away from Hollywood. And when she passed away, when I was making a movie called Granddaddy Daycare for Universal. And at the end of the picture, Universal put a title card at the end of the film that said, for Helen Oliver, who always believed in her son, even when he said he wanted to make movies for a living. So.
Next up, that movie with you and me.
Exactly, Ian. I'm working on the script tonight. I'll go back to the hotel. I'm going to start it out. I'm not sure what we'll call it, though. Christmas with Ian. No, that's too easy.